He was like, I didn't even do anything yet. I was like, no, dude, reverse that shit.
Chaz, thank you for taking some time to chat with us. You are one of the top requested Reason live stream guests when I've been doing this. I started this Reason live stream in 2020, and like the minute I had on the first guest of any size, even the most indie artist, the tweets start coming, you got to get Toro Y Moi, you got to get Toro Y Moi. So
wow.
We're stoked to have you here for sure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I started working with Reason Studios in 2010, right around the time you sort of landed on the scene with Causes, The buzz got to us pretty quick that like, yo, this guy's doing this with Reason, which was pretty rad. How did word get out that you made that album on Reason?
I think I eventually was just letting people know what I was using, but I had just moved from a PC to a Mac, and I was just being hardware minded, and Reason was just like, it looked like it was perfect for me.
I think I and Reason users would love to know sort of your story a little bit, your musical journey of how you got into things, and mm-hmm. I still feel like 2010 was yesterday, but you've been around for a minute now. You've got some albums under your belt, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about sort of the progression of your sound and how that's gone as well.
Yeah.
But jumping back, I guess, to the very beginning of your sort of interest in music. It probably predates when you were actually playing music, right? Just as a kid, you must have probably been into music, right?
Yeah, big time. Aside from like my parents and making me play piano at 7 and stuff, I wasn't really like digging for my own pleasure, like digging for music or like,
right.
But I didn't start looking for music that spoke to me until around 10 or 11. Like middle school, somewhere around there, like 6th grade. And yeah, it really sort of, I think the first thing that really caught my ear was Weezer, the Blue album.
Interesting. So I was going to actually, that's interesting because, when I listen to your music, I sort of have to put a big disclaimer here because I'm not about to say that you sound like Beck to me, but I think about Beck when I listen to your music, because what I actually think when I hear you and when I listen to Beck is I feel like you were both listening to the same sort of source, like early exposure, influence. Like, like you can sort of tell there's certain bands where you can be like, oh, these guys clearly listen to the Beatles. Like I hear the Beatles, not necessarily in their like direct influence, but I can hear that it was like a part of their childhood, And I feel like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like you and Beck probably were getting exposed, either through your parents or just radio when you were a kid, to some similar vibe that has sort of, created a through line for you guys.
I've been hearing people compare some tracks to Beck as well, and I think, yeah, I'll take it as a compliment. I've never really, I haven't really like dived into his discography like completely, but I'm aware of the major ones,
sure,
major albums. But yeah, there's a lot of genre blurring and stuff going on like that, but incorporated with like more traditional techniques and
right.
Not all samples.
If someone were to sort of like, create the bullet list progression of your sound, as I have sort of experienced it, it really does feel like you started and you were very sample based. I mean, Causes is, sort of came up during that. I've heard people that assign you the creator of the Chillwave genre, but I think it's probably more accurate to say that you kind of arrived right as that was kind of coming up, and there were some synergies with that sound that you were also doing, right?
Definitely, yeah.
But you sort of then you moved away, and you sort of, I don't even know what, maybe you don't self-identify your genre now. I don't even know what, it just is Toro Y Moi. It's its own thing. But part of that progression was moving away from samples and into sort of the real instrumentation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that is what we're hearing on the listener side the real instruments? Is that real instruments, or is that just a new way of using samples?
Oh, for sure. They're real instruments, and I think we're gonna see today.
Oh, rad.
Just particularly with this record, Mahal, I tried to go about as samples free as possible. There are some drum loops, like I'll show you some edits and stuff, but yeah, I think the goal for this record was just to capture everything and sort of just go away from samples for a sec.
What was that? The motivation there were you tired of samples, or were you sick of the clearance costs, or?
It's not even that. You know, that is a scare sometimes, but it's more just like out of my own motivation to like challenge and push myself as a artist and as an engineer, producer. It's like I want to know how to mic drums, and I want to know how to record like quartets and stuff like that. So that's what it was. That's what I was getting out of this project, was just pushing myself more on the engineering side of things. Like
it's interesting to me. I mean that progression. If we were to go back in a time machine 30 years, 25 years, it would be entirely opposite. It would be people that came up, playing instruments and recording them. They know how to mic a drum set, and then like, what's this sampler? I gotta get into that. I gotta figure what that's all about, So it's like we've come full circle that, the sampler became the dominant means of production, and then artists like yourself are sort of rediscovering the organic stuff,
Yeah, what I find fun or interesting is I'm still sort of influenced, and I was influenced by the same stuff that I'm into now then. Like when I was working on Causers, there was still 60s and 70s influences. There's some Todd Rundgren and Beach Boys and just other funk and soul.
Right.
But yeah, I was coming from a sample-based mind. And then this record, I'm coming from the same era once again, but trying to just really free the sample, be free of the samples for this record.
Listening to some of that new stuff, Postman, or Deja Vu, some magazine even. What I'm struck with is like there's some like seriously nice bass grooves that feel like they anchor the song. I mean, bass kind of always anchors a song, but
for sure,
when you got a great bass line, you can really just kind of sit back and let that do its work, And I feel like you hit upon a lot of them on this record that I've heard so far.
Thank you. I really felt like this record this is my bassist record. Like I've never really, if you listen to What For, any of the other guitar-based recordings, like they're all starting on guitar or piano. But this one, I started straight up with just the bass for a lot of them. Just to really sort of reverse engineer what I was trying to make. I knew I wanted to really channel that McCartney style songwriting. And as we saw in like the documentaries, what is it? The Abbey Road docs.
Oh,
like
Get Back
Paul's,
and stuff?
or Get Back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul's just starting on the bass a lot of the times too. And like, it was cool to see that, but a lot of these songs were already started before I saw that doc. But it's cool to just know that, yeah, he really is just starting with bass.
Yeah. That's a sort of confirmation of your own thesis of,
Yeah, you could just hear it in the song. And he's just like doling out, a lick to George or something. He's just like, yeah, just fill in this thing here. But he's strumming straight chords on the bass sometimes.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear that is how you were approaching this new record, because you held it through to the, to me, just as a listener popping it on and taking a listen, I get that right away. And I think that's, I guess, the most success you could hope in terms of conveying an artistic vision to the listener. If they actually pick up on it, then great, job well done.
This is the first time where I got to really focus on the rhythm section, like the bass and the drums. And that's how I did most of these jams for this record. It started off with me on the bass with a drummer, or I'll start like for Deja Vu, I just did a bass line, a drum loop, and then I jam the bass line out, and then I go back and play the drums to the bass, to really sort of just really lock in that drum and bass, and then fill in everything from there. Because it's just something I never tried before or really had done, like really just letting it ride on the bass and drums. So
modern recording tools, and certainly Reason has the ability to quantize audio and line up those drums to a grid, or to get that bass, locked into a grid as well. But I imagine if you're going for a feel-based record, that's almost a risk to do that, right?
Oh man, it was so tempting to try to fix a lot of these little things, these that ended up becoming just like the characteristics of the recording. But yeah, it took some practice to just be like, you know what, let it be off the grid. It's fine. It's kind of, I want people to hear that.
Interesting. I know in certain projects I've done, I'll deliberately I'll record not to a click and to a tempo that's not the song tempo, so that I can't, even if I want to, because like if I record to a click, just like while I'm tracking, I almost can never resist. Like I see the slice markers and I see that I just need to like nudge them, and it's like I just can't not do it. So in order to force myself, sometimes I'll just divorce, treat the sequencer more just like a piece of analog tape, where like there's no bar markers on analog tape. It's just a big stream. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes I'll do just the kick or just the snare.
Gotcha.
And that's it.
So, sort of looking at your progression, if we were to kind of jump back to some of the earlier records that were more sample based, did you start to use Reason for the first record, or were you already kind of a seasoned user for a few years by that point?
Causers was like a collection of experimentations done in Reason. But before that, I was working on a digital 9-track from Boss.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't doing anything screen based. It was just indie rock and folk rock, and I think at the time I was just really channeling like Modest Mouse and some other DIY like Bright Eyes.
Oh right.
And really just doing my home recording thing. So Causers really was just like a pure experiment. Like I was like not sure if people are gonna care if there are presets or if it has presets and things like that. I'm like, these are samples. Like, I didn't even change anything. Like, should I worry about that? But I just didn't care. I was just like, I'm just experimenting. So
you're saying some of the samples that are on Causers are from just like factory sound bank out of
Reason. Yeah. Some of the synthesizers are just like the NNXT. Some of the arpeggios are the NNXT. I was just so strict about not sampling and not using presets that before I started using Reason. But then I was impressed. I was like, actually, this sounds exactly like the synth I was looking for, so I'll just use it.
Right. That is something I interact with a lot of the Reason community, and I do think that's something that you, as an artist, you grow out of that worry. It's a little bit of, like, I think when you're starting out, everybody probably carries a little bit of that imposter syndrome throughout their whole life, but especially when you're starting out, it's like you have something to prove. It can't be so easy. I can't just load a preset and make music with it. That's cheating. And then you realize over time, and maybe it doesn't take too much time, but you start to realize, oh, it's the notes that I'm playing that is what I'm bringing to the table, and I don't have to craft, that bell sound that I know I want, and it's right there, and I'm hearing it. I don't have to go reinvent the wheel.
I just learned how to manipulate the sounds and give them the feel that I want. Like, I remember when I was first starting to make music with Ernest from Washed Out, and he was working on Reason too at the same time. When we were doing that sort of our peer consultations, we would just trade tips and stuff, and he showed me this one tip with the Scream 4 and just how to just use that on top of your synth to give it a little saturation, for example, or using just automating the mod wheel to imitate warble and stuff like that.
Right.
Just little tricks here and there to really just not make it so preset-ish, no matter what DAW you're in. Just as give it some air somehow. So
right.
That was the challenge, because I was coming from a microphone-based sort of mindset. So to have everything be in the box was a bit of a shock.
I could imagine. Yeah, going from that Boss sort of Porta Studio environment to in the box production where you can do anything, but you also have to know how to do everything. It's like there's a learning curve to it as well.
And I was really impatient at times. Like I was just like, man, fuck this. Like just go back to recording with microphone and just like, I'll just buy hardware. So that's sort of what ended up happening. I just wanted to like integrate both of those worlds. And I was like, I can't just do everything like in my screen. It's just like, it's not fulfilling something. And then you guys came through and allowed, you know, real-time recording to happening in Elastic Audio, and like
I was gonna say, so
it
this
just
is
fulfilled so much.
That is right around the time that I think audio tracks came in and all that stuff came into Reason, right? So
Pretty much around my third record, because I remember I did all of Anything in Return, my second record. That was still on my Boss 9-track, actually.
really,
So it was crazy. I recorded everything, drums, anything with a microphone into the Boss. Obviously, Reason wasn't doing microphones yet, so I I straight up like I would import the file into my computer and throw everything into the NNXT, draw out the MIDI file
for like the whole song.
and for the whole song. And then I would, this is me learning. Like I was just like, I don't know how to do it.
Whatever it takes to get it done, you know?
So like straight up, when you look at my sessions, they're just like these long strips of MIDI, one note dragged out for like 3 minutes.
But then if you're like, oh wait, I want to hear that mid late again, you got to go to the top and play all the way through, right?
Exactly. I was killing myself. So like it was before YouTube University, like before you could just really just like find a YouTube video on how to do something.
Yeah.
So making it work, luckily I figured out, you know, it doesn't matter anyways, because I went and got that record mixed in a studio in Pro Tools anyways. So like it was just kind of it was just a funny era for like me as a producer, just really trying to find my technique and style in between these two.
I bet
things.
that actually, that weird limitation and almost what I think of now as maybe being frustrating, that you have to always go back to the top of the song and play through. I bet that actually had a pretty big impact on the record, because there's probably things that you were like, fuck it, I'm leaving it. I don't have time for this, you know? And that's probably actually cool stuff. It's like a lot of times the stuff that we take out when we're being a little too exacting is stuff we might regret, you know? And so like leaving in a little of that looseness that just comes from the workflow hindrance probably has a cool effect on that record.
That's just how I mixed.
Yeah,
that's what it was. Like I was so used to recording and using the Reason plugins and the built-in plugins from when I mixed Causers. And I, you know, as a self-mix record, I think it's fine. There's some like amateur stuff going on there, but it didn't bother me. But so I would use some of the same techniques when processing some of the files for Anything in Return. I mean, Underneath the Pine. This is all Underneath the Pine. Sorry,
okay.
I said Anything in Return. It's my second record. Sorry,
second record. Gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
And so I was like, all this stuff for like still sound and stuff, like it was the way I was mixing the drums. That's how I figured out how to, because like trying to mix the drums and a Boss 9-track was just like a headache.
I couldn't imagine. I mean, I never used the Boss 9-track, but I had, you know, my very first recorder was a Tascam Porta Studio. It was, you know, it was the cassette-based one. So I think the Boss was probably the like early digital boxes and stuff. But same idea. And I couldn't imagine trying to mix that stuff with the like 2-band EQ, maybe, you know, like no real effects. Like it would have been, lo-fi for sure.
Yeah.
And maybe not even in the cool lo-fi way, just more in the like frustrating lo-fi. I wanted, speaking of Reason and Pro Tools and sort of, and you starting on FL and stuff like that, there's a thing I want to ask you about, because it made the rounds a few months ago. It had a ton of comments. I think we even shared it on our Instagram. And it's a moment where you were in the studio with Kenny Beats.
Right.
You ask him something, and you're sort of like asking.
He asked me, "What do you use?" And I was like, "Reason." He goes, "Oh, I don't use Ableton actually."
What do you use?
Reason.
Oh.
That's what everyone says. I use Reason. Oh.
Yeah, and he sort of says, and you react in the moment. You go like, you laugh at the way he was like almost a disappointing sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I wanted to ask you about that because I think to some degree, there is that's an identity that we as Reason users, the way you laughed at that, you didn't, it's not like you were like, oh no, he's judging me or whatever.
No.
I tend to find that Reason users wear that reaction almost like a badge of honor.
I do think that's it's a reoccurring theme between producers, or a joke between producers on like what DAW you use. I'll be straight up. My front of house / mixing engineer Pat Jones, he uses Cubase, so there's no shame in whatever DAW you're using. It doesn't have to be the most popular or the most advanced, as long as it gets the job done, for what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
For me, it's Reason. I'm really coming at it just from a hardware and chord wire based mindset. So to see you could just patch things the way you want them to be patched, it's almost like there's more options if you understand how patching works. What I appreciate about Reason the most is just it's a bit more intuitive for the hardware based mind, or the hardware based user. It's just sort of got it's very straightforward.
Yeah.
So like I don't need too many things out of like my recording setup. I really feel like it's either in the hardware that I'm using, it's in the CDJs or the keyboards or the synths. So
in some ways,
there's no right or wrong way.
Do you feel like you're still kind of using like basically the Boss plus in terms of like, you know what I mean? Like it's like just an upgraded Boss rather than a.
I wouldn't even say that. I mean, this is way more intuitive and more fun. And the fact that the board is modeled after SSL, and I can bring that knowledge into a real studio, onto a real console, is like, that's valuable knowledge. So
yeah.
I really do stand by it.
Yeah, we've had, it's now basically a generation of Reason users that have been using the Reason mixer, and they start out, they're kind of up and coming artists, they end up in a studio with an SSL, and all of a sudden they're like, oh wait, okay, yeah, got it, bell curve, sure, like I know what's up. Here's a high pass, low pass, like you're, and you can sort of do the same things that you're used to doing in Reason and actually hear the same result. And it is kind of it's a interesting reverse progression of, rather than getting that SSL style of sound into Reason, you're now able to use your Reason techniques on an SSL, and that's kind of cool. Totally.
You can just know how you like your kick EQ just by knowing which how your knobs are arranged or whatever.
Yeah. Speaking of Reason, should we check out some stuff here and
yeah, let's do it, man.
What are we looking at here in Reason?
Yeah, so this is the session for Deja Vu off of Mahal. As you can see, it's a very simple.
Deja Vu just came out, well, maybe 2 weeks ago now, or not even, right?
Yeah, about 2 weeks now.
What is it like to kind of put a song out and it's no longer yours, it's now kind of out in the world?
Right, it's your baby's all grown up, as I say. It feels good. I used to be a little bit more protective of them.
Oh yeah.
But now I'm just like learning to let go of them as they come to a finish.
Well, it's I think myself and other Reason users always get excited when we see music that we know and then we see it inside of Reason. Like, oh, look, it was made in the thing that I stare at every day, the same orange tracks and all that,
For this Mahal project, I really wanted it to sort of just be cleaned up, because I let this thing just go loose for this whole record.
That's so a good to have word for it. That's how it feels,
Yeah.
Loose in a good way.
Oh, it's loose. Yeah. And I wanted to make sure it was loose and leave that to be heard.
Well, let's check out a little bit of this. I presume people who will be watching this have heard it already because it's been out and it's getting a lot of buzz. But let's can we just kind of take a little listen to a bit of it?
Yeah. So here, I'll just start the track from the top. Yeah.
Right.
mix or arrangement was. Lord have mercy, child. It's almost like it's a little bit more lo-fi. What do you need?
Right.
What do you want right now? I think I'm free, but I'm tied down. Maybe it's greed to take what's found. A wounded knee that came unwound. Anesthesia, please knock me out. Deja vu in a town like this only simply makes me miss everything all about you. Everything that we would do.
So I'm struck by the fact that just looking at the number of mixer channels, there's not a lot of mix channels going on there, and even 4 of those are doubled in harmony vocals. So it's like there's even less than meets the eye if you sort of discount the vocal double tracking and stuff.
No, I really tried to keep it simple on this whole record. Like I wanted to keep the guitar overdubs specifically to a minimum. Like I was with this record, I was kind of responding to my past rock record, What For? Mm-hmm. In the sense that record is full of overdubs and acoustic guitars, and it's a bit more orchestrated. This one, I wanted it to be raw. You hear all 4 things going on. Or whatever.
Right. Can we hone in for a second on the bass and just solo the bass maybe?
Let's do it.
And so this is a live bass. Sounds like flat wound strings.
This is live. Yeah, this is my Hofner.
Oh, Hofner, of course.
So, like I said earlier, I'm just jamming on the bass to a click. And what I did for a lot of these tracks on Mahal, I would just like jam to like a drum track. And the bass really is carrying the song, the root notes and everything.
Right,
so,
right. Yeah, I mean, it's even there, you're doing harmony and stuff. I mean, there's a moment when it kicks into the chorus where it goes to a, at least to my ear, an unexpected chord. Like there's a shift. I don't know what note it is, but it's like you sort of got this whole vibe of like kind of in this sort of this lick that you're doing, doom, 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 doom. And then here, I think. Oh yeah, so it just goes up it's going up a whole step. Yeah, really cool.
So I'll bring in the guitar here. That's where the fun really comes in. I had my friend Dylan Lee, who played in Washed Out. Had some lyrics on top of this.
Oh, but let's. So what you were saying, you had your friend Dylan Lee.
We grew up playing in the same high school band together.
Oh, cool.
Not marching band, but like our indie rock band.
Right. Is it reversed? Is it a mixture of reversed?
It's reversed. Yeah.
But
so
I hear pick attack.
The blue
too, so
stuff
like,
is reversed, and the orange is actually it's a mixture of stuff. But here I can just show you this whole intro clip is actually one take. He was just jamming to my bass and drums. So yeah, here's the original unflipped, unreversed guitar. It was just him just getting the feel for the groove. And I was like, whoa. And he was just like warming up. He was like, I didn't even do anything yet. I was like, no, dude, reverse that shit.
Yeah.
And it was in time. So I was like, whoa, this is good vibe.
Wow.
So yeah, but us both being like Carolina boys, it really like I felt like the southernness was coming through in this track for sure.
I could see like what you mean. Yeah.
Some twang in his playing.
Yeah, there's some twang in the playing, and also in a the overall vibe, I'm going to make a weirdly dated reference here, but
Sure.
do you remember some of the sort of like Arrested Development style, like Southern hip hop vibes, like these real laid back vibes? Yeah, see, I'm going too obscure.
Arrested Development? No,
think
I haven't
that was-
paid that much.
Was it, am I remembering the wrong band? They had a single out called Tennessee. But anyway, it's I totally hear that sort of what you mean with that sort of Southern twang and all that. And so he added there's some other little guitar noises in there too, right? Or am I?
Yeah, there's actually the synthesizer I was messing with, kind of like a modular, but it's not a full size setup. But
Gotcha.
it was just me patching it and making some weird sounds with it. Over there. But yeah.
Now, so when I hear that, I sort of hear it for what it is. I just go like, well, that's a weird noise. And then I don't know what it is, the sort of maybe the insecure part of me goes like, well, I can't do anything with that. That's just a noise.
Yeah.
So how do you hear that and go like, yep, there's my intro. That's what this song needs.
I knew I wanted something a little goofy or quirky. And I don't know, it felt fitting. I wanted it to feel like, to me it sounds like just trippy, it just sounds like you're like, there's like bubbles popping all around you or something, and like you're just like confused. So there's no key to it. It's all like a weird, sequence. I like it almost just for its noise. It's just the randomness of it. So Lord have mercy, child. And you can hear there's other stuff that I've muted apparently. Let's see what it is.
Yeah.
I think it's just more of the same stuff.
Just trying out different things.
Yeah. Ooh.
Oh.
Didn't use that sound.
So you'll just run just run a recording, just play around, and then sort of go in after the fact and figure out what parts you like and where they might fit into the arrangement.
Exactly. A lot of this record, even this song particularly, is just jamming to a click and then chopping out the bad parts and reframing everything. But I think the biggest trick that I sort of learned on this process, again, it goes back to the drums. It was just re-recording the drums after you get everything done. Especially if you're recording by yourself. If you're recording with a drummer, then start with their drums. But for me, because I started with my own drum loop, I wanted to go back and mimic all of the right fills into the chorus and things like that.
So you're saying originally you would have had a different drum loop up top there, and then you kind of built up the arrangement, and then you took that away and retracked drums?
Right.
It's an art form in itself to play something that it's in time in terms of it's meshing with everything else, but it's like kind of got a liberal interpretation of the pocket, It's like
totally
kind of moving in and out of the beat, but just enough to be cool, not enough to go like, yo, what's up with the drummer,
Yeah, totally.
The vocals that you do, a lot of people, and after we check out a couple of these, I've got a little Q&A. I'd like to throw some questions at you from
Sure.
From our Reason fans, your fans, a couple of people that just wanted to know some stuff. But one of the questions that came up from a few different people were people wanting to know, what's your vocal chain? What are you doing for your vocals? And is there anything particularly, maybe not unique's the right word, but is there anything fancy that you do, or is it?
I can show you this is how I turn them in for mixing. It's not a lot. It's annoyingly simple. It's just Scream 4 compression and sometimes there's a second compressor. This is what I do, but who knows what Pat's thrown on there afterwards. Also, this song is a very straightforward vocal track. There are other sessions I'll open up that have more of a vocal chain to it, but
Deja vu in a town like this only simply makes makes me miss everything all about you, everything that we would do.
So each one of those tracks would have that same chain of Scream 4 for a little bit of fuzz and a little bit of compression and...
Yeah. So they just have a little bit of I'm sure, again, there's no right or wrong way. I could have been using sins and inserts, but I was just doing copy paste and just starting a new track or a duplicate track or whatever.
Right.
Sometimes I do color each vocal different.
I'm not saying this in a like you're doing it weird comment, but it's interesting to see your Scream 4 putting distortion on it and boosting the lows. Kind of, you have a little bit of that cut, those EQs going, so you've got like...
Yeah. I really wanted it to be a little bit more of a boomy, bassier vocal.
Right. And you're singing in an upper register as well, sort of a tenor vocal register. So I guess anything you can do to add a little more body to that as well,
Although in a town like this, only simply makes me miss everything all about you.
And like another thing I wanted to achieve with the vocals is like just having them sit in like a mono mix was
oh, interesting.
That was like a hard thing to practice, and just that it was hard to practice that restraint to like not want to pan the vocals immediately.
Right. I made a video, a tutorial for the Reason YouTube channel all about mixing in mono and why people should be doing it more. And one of the things that I think people who ignore that mono exists, there's a real big letdown if you're working in your stereo mix and you're panning everything hard right and you're doing Haas effect delays to all your synths and you're getting this like really wide sound. Like when you hear it in mono, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, what happened to my song? It's like the mix is wrong, the energy's gone. So
totally.
Thinking about mono from the get-go or from the arrangement side of things where you were working and writing, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's something there for sure to be said about just paying some attention to that from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's your foundation. So when you're building a home, for example, or something, like you want your bass and your drums to at least be in a safe spot before you start throwing in all these little seasonings everywhere.
Thinking about the role of mono in today's world, I'm reminded of something, actually I heard in an interview, you said something once where you said, we're living in a playlist world now, or something like that. You had some comment about, and the idea that we're not listening to full albums, but we're listening to kind of just the tracks that other people throw into a playlist. And the other element of that world that we're living in is not only are we living in a playlist world, but we're listening to music on Alexa, which is a mono speaker, or God forbid, iPhone kind of held up, or laptops. It's these really weird listening environments, and that's changed a lot over the course of even in your own career. From what you could have expected people to be listening to in 2010 to 2022.
It's almost looped back around, full circle, to how we used to listen to music. Which is kind of cool and fun, and that's sort of what played into me wanting to even go this direction with this record, like trying to do something traditional, not retro, but just like I'm just doing things kind of in the most like straightforward way with this one.
Could we pop open maybe I'm not sure did you have Postman or was it Magazine? There was a couple other tracks I saw that you had. Maybe we take a look at another one.
You want to just like listen through it?
This was the second single for the album, right?
Yeah, this was the second single. It features Salami Rose, Joe Lewis. We have the drums. I remember, here's the old drums. So again, I just did like a 2-track thing, and it looks like I actually kept them in the recording. But again, when I jammed with Lindsay for this track, she's here in Oakland. So I was jamming on the drums, and she was just jamming on the keys. And the original thing, I'm assuming it sounded something like this. There's just a loop. Again, like me recording my loops, and that allowed me to hop on the bass after we had the drum track recorded. I was able to actually jam with her so like, I think I just recorded a quick loop first, and then I pressed play, and we both jammed. So it became this. Second drum kit, because these were done in mono, and I really wanted to again just sort of give it some more of a stereo spectrum, so I added these second drums.
Are you playing with brushes there?
Yeah,
cool.
Just playing with brushes, trying to get a little bit of a jazzier sizzle out of the kit.
Right. What really strikes me about this, and really so much that I'm hearing off this album, is that the recording process, one of the defining things of the recording process is that it strangles the fun out of music making. You know, like you don't mean it to happen, but it happens because you're doing so much exacting work, and you're retaking, and you're punching in and out, and you're doing all this shit, and it's so easy to lose the fun. And it sounds to me like I hear the fun of that first loop that you and Lindsay were doing. I hear the fun of the bass getting put on top, the drums, and I just can hear the moment of like, oh wait, let me grab the brushes, let me try that. Shit, yeah, that works, and like it's all still there. You didn't kill it,
Yeah, that's the hardest part too, is just like capturing the performance. And that performance doesn't have to be like technically amazing, or like the musicianship doesn't have to be like insane, but it's more just like capturing the fun, like you're saying, and capturing the moment, the spontaneity of picking up a shaker or a certain type of guitar. Or I feel like you really only get like, once you're in the groove and you're hitting record and like you're in that moment of like, what else should we add? Like that's only like a day's worth of stuff. Like,
right.
It's all usually in one session. And then the sessions after that are just maintenance and cleaning it up. And so you have to really have fun. You have to really enjoy that part of the process, because everything else is just cleaning it up.
Track count much higher on this one. So is that because we're
let's see what's going on here. We have a lot of old muted things.
I see.
Which is another technique of mine, is I'll just go and redo everything sometimes until the groove is really locked in. I'm like, that bass or something needs to be redone. Like, let's see what this even is. I don't even know what this is. Yeah, so that's just a completely different bass tone.
That's a cool bass tone, though.
I was like, actually, picking the bass isn't the right vibe. This is too Beach Boysy. Like, I need it to be more. Yeah, and I recorded it through my guitar amp with spring reverb, and wrong vibe. I was like, actually, no reverb on the bass, and I don't need it to be as growly. So like, going to this bass. Yeah, way more.
Wow.
Of a vibe.
Are you playing the same part, or you've even altered the part, I guess, a little bit?
No, same chords for the most part.
Okay.
There's both of them at the same time.
Oh.
So yeah, I just had too much mid in there, and
yeah,
I just felt like it was good. Let's see what else there is over here. We have just guitar parts.
Huh.
Me just figuring out guitar solos and stuff like that. What is this? Yeah, another guitar. I was like, oh, that's too much distorted guitar. I don't think I need that. So if I put it back in.
Right.
I was just like, actually, no overdubs. Actually, only one rhythm guitar.
Huh.
For this track.
Writing is not the hard part. Editing is the hard part. Knowing when to pull something out, or when to, you followed an instinct. I mean, because there's a lot of there's a lot of work that goes into just getting it to the point of saying never mind, right?
You have to cross the line to know where the line is.
Right. That's right. Yeah, and so that's what I mean. It seems like that's what you're doing on all these tracks. Is you're pushing up to that line, and then you're going, all right, no. But that's got to be that's got to be sometimes a hard call probably to make, because you're probably an hour and a half deep into like getting the guitar, setting it up, miking it, getting the right tone, recording the part, and then after all that you go, nah, you know.
That's the story of my life, man. I think that's the story of every musician's life.
Right, that's right.
But yeah, you really have to be like, you have to just be aware of the space and be like, be true with yourself. Actually, as cool as this tone is, like, it's just too busy, actually.
Right.
Or whatever.
Would you ever go back into these and sort of like poach this for something else? Be like, you know what? Actually, that bass tone is kind of cool. Maybe I'll start a new idea with that, loop or something.
Most likely, no. I mean, I'm always down to just try a new sound and experiment, but I wouldn't literally take an unused file and sample it or something. I just let it go. Gotcha.
Well, the world is poorer for it because it is a kind of cool. It's a cool tone there.
Yeah, there's some stuff out there. Who knows? Maybe I'll make a little sample pack for everyone.
Oh, that'd be rad.
Let's see. So we have Lindsay's vocals, of course, were really fun, and I think this. Let's start with my vocals actually, because this is one of the tracks where I actually had a vocal chain going.
Nothing here to see, factories overseas. Cut down all these trees, we're building Model Ts. No more drama, please, no more drama.
You can see the main thing we got going is a little saturation, compression, but the flange is coming from the Polar.
Right, I was going to ask what the Polar was doing. Okay, so that's doing a flange.
Yeah, I got a little de-esser on here.
I love that de-esser. Did you write this part, record it, and then add that effects chain, or were you kind of writing and tracking it with that in your headphones to kind of get the performance?
Oh, no, I write the lyrics without effects.
Okay.
Is that what you mean? Like,
yeah.
Sometimes.
Because it sounds to me almost like the kind of part, it's so married to the performance. It's got this kind of like lilting,
the cadence.
Soft. Yeah, the cadence. Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
Totally. No, I think, no, you're right in that this was on when I was recording and tracking. But even these early takes that I didn't use from the vocals, I knew it needed something because I wasn't going to do a lot of vocal takes. I knew it like, I didn't want to like have a cascade of vocals. I just wanted one take.
Gotcha.
How did I get so wrapped in current affairs?
The flanger that you have on that, when you're singing, it's obviously there. It's kind of mood and vibe, but you don't hear it and go like, oh, there's like a big flanger on that. But when you're not singing, when you hear you breathing or just in between lines, suddenly you go like, oh, there's the flanger, Yeah,
it really captures that breath.
Yeah. But then it doesn't overpower it when you actually are singing.
Yeah, I love this flange. There's so many parameters you can change. I put it on a lot of synthesizers and stuff too. We can see what Lindsay added.
Yeah.
You can see she did all of this vocal stuff, and I ended up just chopping most of this out and just using like
these three tracks here that sort of have a lot of muted clips. Those are
let's see what it
tracks?
is. I can't even. So that's the original like demo. She didn't really have lyrics yet, but then I ended up keeping this final ooh to be the. So I muted this. So if you hear...
okay. So that's not in the intro.
You can hear just the tail end of that note come in. It's this right here. So it's this note. So I just keep that for the beginning of every verse.
Nothing here to see,
wow.
Factories overseas. Cut down all these trees, we're building rosemary bushes.
Right.
serve as like a symbol almost. Like I didn't want to like. I just didn't want more symbol.
It's almost a sample mindset, but in the sequencer.
Totally. It's it's the best of both worlds.
Is she with you in the studio doing this, or does she send you stuff and you kind of?
No, this vocal track, it was done together, and then she went home and wrote the lyrics in and sent these parts back in.
Doubled.
Yeah, it's just doubled. Get your ooze.
Tries to scare.
Some people have asked about your other collaborations you've done. Tyler the Creator, I think, Flying Lotus.
Mm-hmm.
How do those working with people like that differ from working on this record and with people like Lindsay or the guitarist?
People like Tyler, or artists like Tyler and Steve and Philo, like they're visionaries, and like they see the whole and visualize the whole thing. They can hear the whole thing in their head before it's done. When I'm thrown into the mix, I sort of innately bring my producer ear to it. So I try not to, I try to give more space for what they're envisioning, especially if it's their project. Like, I sort of give way to what their vision is, and I just sort of fill in the gaps wherever I can.
Gotcha.
But since, I'm hosting Lindsay on this track, she was at my studio, and she was just sort of taking my lead. She was like, whatever you want to do. She doesn't even usually do stuff with live drums. Most of her drums are programmed. So I was happy to see that we could bring something like that to the, into the song.
Do you find that impacted her performance? Was she a little? I mean, this song is so loose, and she is part of that as well. It's a very loose performance from her as well. Is that her?
Yeah.
Is that her sort of responding to the track and bringing that into her performance? Or
we both knew going into it, it was going to be more of a straightforward arrangement, not too experimental, not too jazzy. So we kind of knew to stick with like 4-bar loops, 8-bar loops, and keep it simple.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just having fun. And that's something that I really feel like I learned in this recording process. Sometimes it's okay to just keep a loop, or not even keep a loop, but just play the same thing the entire song. Sometimes you're kind of psyching yourself out and you're like, man, I need more parts, or I need to switch this up because it sounds like a loop. But sometimes it's okay that it sounds like a loop.
That is sort of the magic of what Daft Punk was doing. Was sometimes they could find 2 bars that you didn't want it to change. I just want to hear 2 bars for 5 minutes, and I'm happy with that,
Yeah.
Well, listen, I don't want to keep you forever. I'd love to keep you forever, but I don't want to.
No worries.
I don't want to abuse you of your time. But I would love to shoot you some questions here from the Reason community.
Yeah, let's do it.
From the Toro Y Moi fan community, and we've gathered a bunch of questions. I've got 40 of them. I'm not gonna ask you all 40 because
oh yeah,
that's
a lot.
It's a lot. But I'm gonna throw out some of these. Some of these might just be rapid fire, yes, nos, or short questions. Some might be a little more. So one of the ones Guillaume asks, I'll toss out the usernames when I mention them so I can actually remember to throw their question up on screen. But Guillaume asks, how do you process your vocals? We got a lot of these versions. Is it different from album to album? Because we've seen how you're doing it on this latest album.
It's different from track to track. Really.
Right.
But
okay.
It's different every time. Like sometimes I'll be pretty straightforward and just a compressor and EQ.
Gotcha.
Sometimes that's all you need.
Gotcha. Young Skirt asks, First of all, he says you're one of his biggest inspirations, and for using Reason, and he wants me to tell you that. Tell him I said it.
Nice. Thanks, young skirt.
But he also wants to know how you got some of the filter motions on Causers of This. There's, so much of those samples are, it's not just the sample, it's the way you're manipulating the sample.
Yeah. That's a very cool question. I'll show you right now. Just what I do is I actually like to throw things straight onto the master, and I know this is probably taboo, but that's what I was doing for for Causers. I was just straight filtering the master at times and just having fun with this one. Ooh, see, it filtered me out. Yeah, the ECF 42 and just playing with the resonance.
Old school half rack one, yeah.
So, a lot of that stuff was just,
That is, gotcha. And then would you automate that by hand, or would you draw in automation, or?
Both. I think at the time, at that time in my life, I was just programming a knob on my MIDI controller and having some fun.
Kind of riding it and playing with it. Gotcha. Cool. Oh, so we kind of looked at this. The Nebraska Fire wanted to know how you got that amazing guitar sound at the end of Deja Vu, particularly at the end. Is there a sound at the end that is different than, or is it sort of that same thing we were listening to?
I think he's referring to, there's another track called The Medium, where for the music video for Deja Vu, we put the medium at the end of it, and I think he might be referring to those guitars. But yeah, I mean, that track, that's just, I forgot what pedal it is. It's some crazy like Cream,
gotcha,
the band Cream distortion pedal.
Colin wants to know, do you have a formula for typical creative process in making music, or do you find that your tracks are different every single time?
Well, I never know how the song's going to turn out, if it's going to be like for less sins or just a beat, or for Toro. Like, I never really know, but generally, if I know, I'm trying to just like make a pack of beats for a rapper or something. I'm always starting with drums.
Gotcha.
Or samples. But it's usually the drums, and I'll just manipulate the sample to fit in the drums or something. But if it's like a something like this, where it's like microphones and acoustic instruments, I think I usually start with, first of all, the song idea. For this one, it was the bass. Like, I remember, not for this track, but for Deja Vu, I was just jamming on the bass, and Dylan was jamming on the guitar, and I was like, actually, let's track this.
Seb is asking, is Toro Y Moi infected with gear acquisition syndrome? It sounds like Seb might be infected with it. And looking behind you, I mean, certainly you've got a lot of hardware, but would you say that you suffer from gear acquisition, or are rewarded by gear acquisition syndrome?
I definitely, I'm maxed out. I don't want really to acquire more than 5 cents. That's a lot already, I really feel like. So like,
right.
There's a couple more downstairs, and there's one at my house. So I'm up there.
What I did when I've got this rack over here with some of my hardware compressors and stuff. And when I ordered this rack to be built, I purposefully ordered it with just 2 extra spaces, and that's it. Yeah. Like, I could have made it bigger, but I knew I'd fill it if I did. So I was like, I'm gonna just give myself 2 more things, and then I'm cutting myself off.
Yeah, I try to keep it to a minimal. I try to keep a minimal setup, is what I'm saying. Like, yeah. You can't see, but I have one of those output desks. I only have 4 pieces of gear in here: the Fatso, reverb, and a channel strip in my sound card. So
gotcha.
I'm a Fusion Studio, Project Studio / not Project Studio, hardware / software.
Right.
But yeah, the JX3P is a staple. I don't think I'll ever get rid of it. I don't think I'll never get rid of the DX7. And then the Moog, that's probably staying here for a long time too. Just I'm always going back to that for sub frequencies. This SQ80 it's got a ways. It's got to prove itself still. So I'm like on the fence about it. I'm like, man, I can't use any of these sounds yet.
Right. Oh, interesting.
I'll figure out something to use it for.
So, let's see. LXUAE would like to know where you get your drum samples from. I mean, obviously on this record, they're from your drums. You're playing them yourself.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about some come from hardware drum machines as well.
Yeah, I am proud to say, and this is no shade, but I'm proud to say that I don't have like a Slice account or something like that, or any of those like pre-curated places to find sample. I legit just like dig on like Reddit and Blogspot and finding those like old school zip files of like sounds. Yeah, so I do that. Occasionally some friends will send me folders of samples and stuff. But yeah, at the same time I also just make my own, like in the Kong. I'll just like pick a snare, shape it, color it. Yeah, I even with the samples that I do find from other sites, I'm still manipulating them to be what I'm hearing, which is usually something with like a short tail.
Okay. Dando asked a question. Do you have any tips? He started out by asking, do you have any tips on how to write and arrange songs? But he actually corrected himself and said, and more specifically, how to finish songs, which maybe that's actually the thing more people would love to know how to do.
How to finish songs. Like, well, as you can see on this session, like I said, all of these red things are things that didn't make it. So you have to really pass that point of like being sick of the project and being like, actually, I'm not hearing that work. I'm not hearing this work. When you get to that point, that's a good sign. Like that's when you can start listening for space and listening for structure and trying to figure out what kind of song you want this to be. Or I think a big thing I try to keep in mind is we have to remember that if you're trying to survive as an artist, you're making a product. You're making something to be consumed and or bought. So just know who your audience is, know who you're making it for, what you're making it for, and that'll help you figure out the mix, the lyrics, the tone, everything else once you figure out why you're doing this.
Gotcha. Related to that, Dan Delian asks a question about constraints and restrictions and whether you sometimes purposefully put constraints on yourself. Maybe it's just giving yourself a deadline, and just being like, I got to be done by this time no matter what. Or maybe it's a technical thing of like, I'm only going to use one synth or something like that. Do you employ those kind of tricks for creative boosts?
Often, yeah. I think limitations definitely give us like interesting results. Like that's why it's sometimes I don't know, it's more fun or harder or easier to work with hardware, for example. Like it can be, there's no right or wrong way. Again, I feel like it's more just like doing something you haven't done before and just trying to push yourself, and then that will inevitably push the music.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Blue Java just wants to know about Postman. Anything about how you laid down the extremely funky bass on Postman? If there was any additional processing, is that also using the Hofner, kind of that flat wound thing?
That was a Hofner, but the secret sauce on that is a wah pedal. I'll tell y'all. Yeah.
Okay.
So
wah pedal.
Yeah, wah.
There you go. So Blue Java, get yourself a wah pedal, and you too can have and maybe a Hofner, but a bass with some flats on it. You'll be pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Chaz, I so appreciate you hanging with us here and giving us all this time and looking at some of these tunes. Yeah. Any final advice to the Reason community out there, or just the music community in general?
Yeah, I think first of all, there's no shame in using Reason. You are cool. You're cool in my book. And second of all, is like it's cool to just have built a relationship with you all just through using Reason. It's not like I hit you up asking for freebies or anything. It's just we're both just genuine fans. I still buy my own updates and all that stuff. Like it's yeah, so it's not, this isn't anything paid or whatever, sponsored, but I'm a genuine fan of the program, and it's great to see how you all listen to your users and see what there is to be improved. And yeah, I think just continue to keep doing good work, and you'll have solid users. And thank you to the fans.
You have the ear right now. You know, when this plays on the live stream, you're going to have the ear of the CEO who's watching, the Reason developers who are watching. Is there any feature that you'd love to be like, guys, all right, this is my big ask?
You know, I'll start compiling a list. It's not too big, but I think I would love to, be involved. So,
man, yeah.
But as of now, I think, you guys know what you're doing, and I'll continue to purchase my updates and be a genuine user fan. So
love it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, Chaz, thanks so much for chatting with us, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon and again.
Thank you so much, Ryan.